Hey, everybody, it's Mark J. Ryan, and welcome to the Mark J. Ryan Experience. And today I have got a great guest with me, a really good friend, one of the few people in the world that I've trusted to actually do personal coaching with. His name is Dr. John Burton. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for having me on.
I got a little bit of bio that I'm going to read here to give you the audience, the listening audience, the viewing audience, to tell you a little bit about who this guy is and how powerful and good he is at what he does and how much experience he's had. So it'll kind of, as you start off listening to the interview that we're going to go through, you'll have some respect maybe in a little higher level of listening than you normally would here. So John holds a doctorate degree in human development counseling from Vanderbilt University. Is that correct, John?
It is.
Yep. Okay. You're a licensed professional counselor with over 38 years of professional experience. Where my mind was going was thinking about the hours. Now, last time I talked, I think you had clocked it around 48,000 hours or 45,000.
It's about 35,000 hours.
35,000, excuse me. So I've been giving you extra hours, and hopefully that just signifies how much far into the future you're going to continue doing.
That's right. I like that.
So you're also a certified in clinical hypnotherapy.
Yes.
NLP master. You're a Reiki master.
Yes.
And you have training in medical intuition, which is really interesting, as well as an Eric Pearl with the reconnection.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
And I particularly liked the medical intuition. Went up to the Edgar Cayce Institute up there in Virginia Beach and did, 4 days, I think it was, with some people who are experts in the field of medical intuition. It was fascinating to go through the exercises and the learning. It was really cool.
So you got some great experience, and what I like about you is the roundedness, and what I like doing coaching with you, because even though I like to talk about energy and spiritual things, you were able to meet me there, and that's real important in people's maps and models of the world, that you're able to meet them there, and you practice it yourself, but also you're able to know and have a sense of where I'm at and talk to me from my map and model of the world, which I think is really important to have those other things well balanced. A lot of doctors and people you talk to, they'll have a very strict concept. John, well-rounded, open, and listens to what you have to say. And I want to get to the favorite part of this. And you're an author of 4 books.
Yes, sir.
And these are some of my favorite books. I got all 4 of them here. Your most recent one is The Sacred Sequence.
Yes.
And hopefully that's not backwards. And the screen that I'm showing, it's perfect. Okay. And the little screen up I've got on top on my Zoom, it's backwards there. And I think this is your second most recent book.
Yes.
Yep. And that's Understanding Advanced Hypnotic Language and Patterns. Another great book. And I'm trying to think which one I read first. I think the hypnotic language, it's used in your structure. That was your first book, right?
That was the first one, yep.
With Bobby Bodenheimer. He's a doctor too, isn't he?
He is a D-Min, yes.
Doctor of Ministry, yeah. And this is, it's hard to tell between your most recent, The Sacred Sequence, and The States of Equilibrium, which one I like better, but they're both just amazing books. And The States of Equilibrium, and then your most recent Sacred Sequence is the ones I've read the most. And the inside, I'll just see, I don't know if you can see this or not, but Sacred Sequence, you can see all my notes in underlining that I don't know if you can see that from there, John, but there's a lot of writing in there from notes that I've taken and done. So, and you also do trainings with the general public, but also counselors and coaches themselves. And you're going to be doing one, which we'll talk about. And in a couple of weeks, you're going to be doing a 2-day training too, which we'll get into.
Yep.
And unless you want to mention that, what's the name of it? Say it right now. The training.
It's going to be April 19th. It's just a 2-hour introductory thing.
2 hours, not 2 days. I'm sorry.
Yeah. To eventually, I think it could be, but introduction into the newest material, which I've called A Conspiracy of Love, Revealing the Heart of the Universe.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit about where you're going with stuff, because so much of what you were doing with the books that I have over there, you really started with some great hypnotic books of the type that I hadn't read before. And I liked the angle that really got me interested in you, and I made a connection with you and went down and saw you in South Carolina or somewhere was it South Carolina?
It was actually, it was in Greenville, South Carolina. Where I lived for a long time. Yep.
Came down and saw you for a 2-day seminar years ago. Do you remember the year of that? I don't even remember the year.
That was, wow.
A long time.
Yeah, probably 03, 04 maybe.
Wow. Okay. So you've gone through transition. Why don't you give us a little bit, and then you go whatever direction you want, and then I'll follow up. I've got some questions for you here. You started off some of the people that you had been in training with that where I originally came in as an introduction to you was like this guy Burton, man. He's got into this hypnosis and taken to it like crazy. He really has picked up on it quickly, and I think that might even have been with Dr. Bobby Bodenheimer, where he wanted to do some things with you, and then you kind of went into more the spiritual realm, and that's we really got close then, and I had you doing more personal coaching for me. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your transition through the traditional therapy that you've been doing and counseling with people, and you're really good with trauma with people, and then how that worked into hypnosis, and then how that's brought you to where you are today. And you take your time, and if you've got any tangents you want to go off on, let's go.
I like a good tangent.
All right.
That can be tangential.
All right.
No problem. I appreciate you kind of pointing out the developmental or evolutionary phases, because I really value what I've been able to, discover along the way of searching for, accuracy, truth, principles. And, it started with, I think the NLP training I did with Bob Bodenhammer was just life-changing and invaluable. That was 96, I think it was. And just never thought the same way again since then. And it really allowed me to start pursuing more clear understanding of human dynamics, but also of going meta to that, to look at the relationship with spirit and with source, or whatever name we choose to use. God is the most frequent, but whatever the sort of origin of everything is, the inception point, so that it became more and more about the relationship and the dynamics thereof, of not just humans, but how the interaction is with spirit, and what we can learn and shift and manifest as a result of that. And so it started with language, which was just fascinating to me, because in a way, words are just quantum. They're just energy packets, right? They're not anything in specifics. They are an energy packet that guides us into a certain perspective or a certain awareness. And so by utilizing words very carefully, we lay out stepping stones that lead us to a new way of thinking, feeling, and greater awareness, which then creates a higher consciousness. And I think that's kind of where I ended up as my launching point, was really looking at consciousness and levels of consciousness and their influence, which ties back into my developmental psychology background. And
so the words were important to you in that aspect. And it's funny, it brings back a little memory. Mine first occurred before NLP. It happened in church, where a minister was talking about faith-filled words. And I'm like, faith-filled words? Words filled with faith? What? Containers? I'm just like,
yes,
yeah. So NLP really did kind of the same type of effect. I really got like, wow, I did consider the energetic aspect of it. So that was it for you then too. You got excited about the idea of what other things words can contain besides just sounds.
Yes. Oh, exactly. And how you can use the sound even of the word as part of the pointer, so that which you talk, the depth of the voice or the volume of the voice, it changes the experience of that energy of that word. And it leads the person into a different place. I think of words in some ways as being like a baseball. If you throw it to somebody, they've got to go where you throw it to catch it. And so they have to at least briefly take a look at what you're offering in that perspective that the words invite.
Now, John is, as you just heard, with the throwing something to catch something, John is a master at metaphors. And he's given me some to use in my products from many, many years ago. So, pay attention to some of the stories he tells, because he's doing it very volitionally. He's thinking about what he's saying and saying about what he's thinking. And there's a lot more to what he says. So to catch that or watch this over and over again and listen to it. Excuse me again, John. Please.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. I just tend to think in metaphors, get pictures and metaphors of dynamics of human behavior and internal dynamics and energy dynamics and even spiritual dynamics. It just sort of, whatever is provided for me through spirit, I really appreciate. So that gives me a nice visual metaphor, which turns into language, which kind of describes either the current dynamics, which sort of reveals the flawed reasoning in it, or points to another kind of sort of solution-oriented dynamic that allows a person to go, you know, I like that a lot better than the heck of the thing I was using. And so it really allows people to explore, almost like thought experiments, you could call it. And
Yeah.
so they get to try it on without using it.
They have their own choice. If they take it on and they try it on and they actually go to catch, like what you're saying, to go there and say, I like this better than what I'm doing. I remember the beginning of NLP and stuff, and people would say things about, you know, do this and do that, and you like it better. And I'm like, yeah, I think I pretty well know the way I want. But I tried some of it on and going like, oh, this works much better. Why am I resisting that? What else you got? You got another story? You got something else you can give me?
Right. It really opens things up. And then pretty soon we let go of the concepts we've been holding, or the ones that have been holding us in some ways. And so I guess what I wanted to move into is the concept of responses, because I feel like that's an incredibly powerful opportunity that sometimes we overlook. So
give me an example when you say responses. Is it the normal response when somebody says, hey, John, and you go, hi, Mark, you know, or what can I do for you, Mark? Is it that type of responses? What kind of responses are you talking about?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. It's like we have sort of two responses. The first one is almost like a reflex. It's our primitive brain, as I like to call it, limbic system, ego. It's so protective that it's like a reflex, and it just responds immediately from a place of survival, self-protection. But if we pause long enough to consider that and then reevaluate, as Cynthia Bourgeault calls it, the sort of the third way is going in between that space before using that first response, if we just stop and pause. Sarah Brock calls it the sacred pause, so that we allow ourselves to choose the response to our own response. Do I want to use that initial urge, or do I want to reconsider the implications and the consequences?
Now, that sounds to me a lot like the Buddhist arrow, the first dart, the second dart. Is that similar to?
Very similar. Yep.
The first. So what you're saying is like the first dart is like a reflex, and we don't have much of a choice. But the second one means we have a choice, and we don't necessarily have to go with the initial reflexive response.
Exactly. So then we have that opportunity to develop the foresight, the patience, and the flexibility that are the sort of trademark of using a higher reasoning, a higher part of our consciousness.
I remember those three words before.
Yes.
I'm sure we're going to get into it more.
Freedom.
And personal freedom, yes. Good memory.
And so what we do is we find that our response is really what shapes our reality. We think reality is what comes at us, but the truth is our response is what shapes the reality we experience.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. A client I was working with recently, he'd lost his job, and it wasn't because of what's going on now, but it was before that. And he'd lost his job, and so his reflex was, because of his own history, not feeling good about himself, his reflex response was to shut and just say, oh, well, I'm done. I'm a loser. And what that did was to create a whole reality of absence of job, financial difficulties, negative self-talk on the inside, negative self-concept. It created a whole reality that he then embodied and lived.
So was this something he already had in his nervous system that he just went back and a map that he had that he just applied again, reapplied?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep, it was like a pre-existing condition, and it just took that adversity, and then it said, oh yeah, right, remember, I don't do things very well.
Oh, yeah. And it's easy. Was that a reflexive response?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And the response created that reality, but it's one of countless realities available, right? So Keanu Reeves will be visiting soon, I'm sure. And so we have the choice of response so that we can choose our consequence, because our response shapes that reality. So it's like, okay, yeah, I don't have a job. What will I do? Well, I'm going to fix up my resume. I'm going to find out all my personal contacts that I can get in touch with to see what's happening out there in the world. I'm going to put out resumes, apply for jobs, go to employment agencies, all those kind of resourceful responses. So that creates a whole different reality, so that our responses are really what shapes and creates our reality. We think it's an external force coming at us, but it's actually our response to that is what we experience.
Well, how do you know, or how do you develop that?
It takes some time. It's like partly is sort of the old question of how's that working for you?
Yeah, Dr. Phil, how's
Well,
that working for you?
exactly. And so it's like, well, not so good. I don't like what happens as a result. We treat that result as though it's another piece of external reality that's coming at us, but it was actually manufactured by us.
I was talking to a guy earlier today, and I'm trying to think how to phrase this in a way that doesn't reveal too much. So, what if the person doesn't believe that that's possible? I'm finding that a lot of clients I work with, as I go through that process and getting to offering them an alternative way to respond to their reality,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the resistance I get seems to be from the idea of they're not saying it directly, but all their body language and language says, I don't think that's possible. I can't do that. I'm too old to teach a dog a new trick, something like that.
Right.
Is that something you're running into yourself?
I think there's a belief system that's in place that needs to be addressed. And the belief system is errant. It's misunderstanding, misinterpreting events, partly in history, because something was taken personally that was involving very often parents, but some kind of an authority figure or power figure in their life. They took something personal, a belief about self and a belief about life, and then it becomes an entity that dictates.
So it's one of those response things, and because they've been in it almost so long that the concept of maybe I don't want to be like this or I don't want to do that, the concept, but what do they do different? There's not been enough time spent with the possibility of doing something different to give them the hope that there's something different out there. And
sure, they start believing that, well, it's been going on like this for so many years. I've had this experience, that experience, this experience, and they start counting the experiences that actually are supposedly evidence. But what they really do is tell us what happens when we have a particular belief and a response set. It creates that reality. And the primitive brain, as I call it, the ego, likes to believe that it only works in the negative direction.
And your books are full of examples of, from childhood development that you studied with, and which was a real wake up call for me, was that these patterns were ingrained, kind of hardwired in a while. And then we get software that goes in with the hardwired stuff, and we think we're just stuck with that. We can't. And it seems like those beliefs that we can't do it and it's not possible actually work against us at that point, using those same kind of patterns, those same gestalts, and who was it? There was Lovinger, gestalt patterns, and then the Piaget, who I really enjoyed his work there. They tend to work against you.
Principles. Mm-hmm.
And you have a way of taking this and help restructure those same hardwired patterns to help them work for somebody, to say, these pathways that are in there, now let's get them to work for you.
Right. So it's like, the same principle that gets us in trouble becomes the principle that holds the new form in place.
Gotcha.
When we raise consciousness, we get to a place where we recognize nothing is about us. It's possible for something to be about us, because no matter what comes out of somebody else's mouth or what actions they may take, it reveals their belief system and their needs and their values. It tells us nothing about what they're viewing.
So that's an exciting point to me that you point out still all these years later, is that when you said that about the higher consciousness, are there different patterns within that higher consciousness that it can take us out of, I think you said the limbic system before, to take us out? So that's one of the reasons why you like to help bring people into a higher view, a higher consciousness, a higher perspective that then has its own ways of seeing reality, or our personal reality, that can maybe texture the limbic system once. Am I saying that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. In the sense that the more you elevate consciousness, the more you separate from the limbic system and its misunderstandings. And so as a result, then we're sort of free of that. It's like breaking free of the gravitational pull of the earth or something. And so there we are. And we're not being pulled or drawn by something, but rather we're literally free to move about however we choose, so that we recognize, one is nothing is personal, and two is, in some interesting way, there's no such thing as a self, there's just pure awareness.
Yeah, just listening to that, knowing this, working with this myself, excuse me, even to hear you say to break free, to move around in a different way. I can feel that freedom within myself considering that. There's something really neat about knowing that we're in a phase of the limbic system, but there's ways to get out, to view it. But then there's a freedom within it that we don't necessarily have to go back. We fall back into the limbic system and those patterns. But to have something now and grow as a mature adult, that's pretty cool.
To be able to gain separation from that limbic system by raising consciousness creates, and to me, that is the response to the response. So that reflex that comes in from the ego, our response to that is to
gotcha. So it's a matter of practicing that with the things, different things that you teach, that then give you something, a solid foundation to kind of remember, to bookmark in a sense, to be able to go back to it again.
Yes.
Quickly, not having to go through the whole learning process, but quickly in a book, we put a bookmark in there so we can open it up and know exactly where we left off. That if we're going to learn this stuff, these techniques and what you're teaching from the spiritual realm, give us a bookmark to quickly and easily go back there.
Yep. And one of those bookmarks is a physical sensation. Because every emotion, there's a physical sensation, whether it's depression or joy, there's a physical location and sensation that accompanies it. So it becomes a body, a cellular experience, so that when we get into that highest consciousness, there's a different kind of sensation that happens. And usually it's centered either in sort of the solar plexus or in the heart area, or both. And so there's like a lightness or a warmth, and it becomes an anchor as well as a point of entry into that state of consciousness.
How do you begin to get somebody there?
One of the exercises I like, and I've just come to call it Here Comes the Sun, it's based on the solar plexus. And it's kind of, some people would call it sort of where our energetic essence resides, deep within our solar plexus. And so if we put our consciousness right there at the surface of our solar plexus.
And when you say solar plexus, it's kind of like where your sternum is in a sense, right?
Just below the diaphragm.
Just below the diaphragm, okay.
Yep.
And so go ahead. Between your rib cage and stomach? I'm sorry.
Yeah, kind of just below the sternum, just below the diaphragm.
And just put your awareness on it?
And just put your awareness there and just start literally at the physical surface and just be right there, so that your focal point is maybe this big. It could be a little smaller if you like, but just right in that little space. And then as you just kind of notice the surface, allow your consciousness and your sensations and senses to just drift beneath the surface into what would be literally the stomach. And then passing through that with just your awareness and your consciousness and sensations, go beneath through the physical stomach into a place where there is a formless sense of energy. And you just feel this presence. It's maybe baseball size. Some people, golf ball, the size doesn't matter, truly, but that there is this indomitable presence. And we just tune into that and go into that. And notice how it feels, what you experience. And in this place, it is pure receiving. You are simply receiving effortlessly. And then the whole being gets to experience this. Mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. And when you're in tune with this energy as you are, in its very center, there's a sense of timelessness about it. It just is. And so as we sit in this, feeling it, being aware and receiving from it, it's a very healthy separation from the external world to remind us of what we are, who we are, how we are. And it's a deeply confirming, comforting, constant presence, really, that allows us to just be, effortless being. And in this place, there is deep security. It's more than confidence, it's just truth. You are that you are. And in this place, all is well. and you know nothing is about you. You can observe freely, choose freely, unfettered being. And so this creates a point of entry into your eternal essence in this constant presence that resides within. And so it's a place to go very often first thing in the morning and just randomly through the course of the day, just to remember and be reminded of the very thing we seek most, which is security, comfort, peace, ability, freedom. And then there is a relationship that happens in this place, in this energy that resides within the receiving. What is this? How does this come to be? Why is this even? Like, wow, it's just in the presence of love. And that's all there is. Engulfed in a very healthy, helpful, pleasant way. Sort of suspended within it in a sense. And so this is one of the ways that I invite people to find their unique presence within and their personal truth at its best.
You want me to talk now?
Yeah.
I first started thinking, I said, oh man, he's taking me into a trance. Maybe I was talking so much. He's getting me to be quiet.
No,
that was, if I can share a few things that I noticed on that, it was really good how you brought it from the outside to the inside. I'll go back and listen to that. That was very effective in getting into that place, and that's the way it slows down so much. And towards the end, I noticed that the temporal time and space, the questions about time and space that I have from the linear were not there.
Exactly. It goes past those, going all the way through them to the place where they no longer exist.
Yeah. So I can see sometimes I hear people that have had, gone through the tunnel, near-death experiences, and they talk about how there's like an absence of time and space. But from this point of view, you go like, well, how is that possible? What's that like? But when you just, as I went through that experience there's like an absence of the temporal, the time and the space that's there. And then those questions aren't important or something.
Exactly. They become irrelevant because what do they really matter?
And so much of our stuff, crap, is all associated with time and space. Those are the two
absolutely.
things.
It's all kind of oriented to that, right? And when that vanishes, what holds it together? Nothing.
Beautiful. Yeah. That was really nice. Thanks, John.
A little while ago today, I was doing some writing and I accidentally hit that insert button on my laptop.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like
the blue square thing.
It looks like the rest of the buttons, harmlessly enough. It's just a little rectangle piece. It's sitting next to the delete button. And I guess I hit that accidentally. And I remember the first time I hit the insert button, I didn't know it. And I had no idea what the heck it was. And I was trying to type some stuff and it's like, hell, every time I put in another letter, it takes the one out.
It takes it away, yeah.
And I was thinking, for every new and different choice we make, doesn't it do that to our past?
That's one of them metaphors again, isn't it, John? You just got me.
Ain't it?
That's good. Yeah, no, that's a great way of taking something that I see a lot. And I don't realize I hit the insert key. And I start to, that's the blue box that I was talking about. This little blue box comes up and then I say, okay, that's backspace and it's like, I'm trying to put new letters in and it does, but it takes out the other. It's like, what is going on here?
Right.
Yeah. So if I apply that then to what you're going to have to say it again. I guess.
Sure. So that when we make different and new choices, place of higher consciousness, it does replace the old.
Yeah. Something new that works better, more efficiently, more useful to people, and replaces from
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily. I like the replace word instead of getting rid of.
Yes.
Replace is a kinder, gentler way of saying that
Right.
to the system.
Sure. And then it becomes the active element.
So that process continues, is what you're saying. That we go
So
back into that place again. That we can then use the insert feature, so to speak,
exactly.
to keep it going.
Yep. We insert from that higher consciousness, and it's like, wow, I like that. And it's a lot easier in an interesting way. There's not so much drag on it because it's not exactly experiencing the gravitational thickness of
of resistance in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
that what then it almost bypasses or gets around or goes through it gently, and is a process that works. Yeah. So I'm still kind of in a hypnotic state from that first one. So
that's cool.
I remember you had talked about 2 different processes that you thought were instrumental that you'd like to show here today, and what you're going to be teaching in your 2-hour seminar.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, fairly recently I became aware of the well, let's call it transnoia is a term that Roger Walsh, MD, PhD, really incredibly great spiritualist and shamanistic studier, came up with this term transnoia. And transnoia means that everything in this universe is conspiring to assist us in our growth toward union with Source, Creator, God.
So I've heard the term pronoia.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a little audio feedback. I don't know if how loud are your speakers or your... No, it's turning down now.
Yeah, good.
So the pronoia that the universe is conspiring, like people talk about paranoia, the universe is conspiring against me. Pronoia, the universe is conspiring for you. But transnoia, I like that word. And so how does that fit between those two?
Sure. Transnoia is like recognizing that everything, whether you can see it and measure it, or it's in concrete, tangible form or immeasurable, all for the same purpose of helping us and assisting us in growing closer in union with God. And so that's the conspiracy thing that I ended up using as the title, Conspiracy of Love, because everything on that same purpose, that same behalf, ours, each one of us, so that it becomes a learning process of understanding and interpreting the events that we experience, and recognizing and seeing through the surface, because the ego doesn't have the ability to see through the surface. And so seeing through the surface to sort of the abstract or metaphorical level allows us to really get the message that is being given to us by Source, by God, Creator. And so even things like adversity are actually invitations. So the negative emotions or experiences, they're invitations to grow closer, whereas obviously the positive ones were, I saw a hawk flying the other day and it was just a beautiful sight. It's like, wow, that's direct experience with spirit. But the adversity is sort of the disguised ones. They're invitations to get deeper into our being. And in the process of that, we get closer in connection and union with God.
So can I ask you a question on that one? What comes up for me is the sense of when we get into the limbic system, I get into the limbic system, other people I know get into the limbic system, or if we're trying to encourage other people, if they get into that state, there's a part of you, it's kind of like, I don't want to do that right now. I don't want to talk about that right. I don't want to think about that. You know it's going to be good for you. You know what's going to work. But it's like you almost want to play with a little bit that feeling for a little bit. You're going to try to extract something from that.
Exactly.
How do you deal with that with yourself or with somebody else that you know is there, and maybe they're like, I'm not ready for that right now. What might you do to?
It's an interesting kind of I don't know, paradox or something that the ego does. It holds what hurts. Somehow it's going to be able to convert that into some kind of bring positives, right? If I hold the crap long enough, somehow it'll turn into gold dust.
Yeah.
No, it stays crap.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what I've come to also realize is that emotions, as we might call them, the negative ones in particular, they're products of the ego. And if we use the transnoia concept or this conspiracy of love, then we recognize that even emotions are quantum. They're just packets of energy.
Mm.
A source, they have an origin, and they even have a purpose. They have an intention. And so depression, for example, is an invitation, because all the negatives are invitations to go deeper and closer in connection with God. So depression, which is about sadness and loss, well, what is it we've lost? Oh, a connection. What are we sad about? Oh, the lost connection. Oh, even a good book by that title. Lost Connections.
Yeah.
And so what it's doing is inviting us to go deeper again into ourselves, whether it's through the spiritual heart, the divine heart, or through the solar plexus, to get into that place where our pure state of eternal beingness resides. So that depression, for example, is an invitation.
Yes.
Usher. And when we can recognize that it's not just an invitation and an usher, but what is the origin that made it that? Oh my God, what kind of gift is that? So we can actually give thanks, not to the depression, but to the source of and the intention of the depression, which is inviting us to go in deeper and develop more intimate relations with Creator, with Source.
Using a current situation, it's almost like the medicine for the virus, in a sense. That's if we look at it as it's medicine, it may not look like it tastes good, but in actuality, from the perspective of the ego, it may not. But once you pop over into it and start inviting it in, ushering it in, and taking that invitation, then there's like a sweetness that goes with that makes it more palatable.
Yep. And so with the understanding of the origin, the source, the inception point of depression, for example, we can give thanks to that core essence. And because when we understand it, it knows that we've reached a level of consciousness that is beneficial. Because
you broke up a little bit to me that you said it reaches a level of consciousness that, and then you broke up. It knows
that when we can give thanks by truly understanding its origin, then it knows we've reached a level of consciousness, so that our gratitude toward the gift, not of depression per se, but the origin point of that, the invitation and the kindness and the love that it is resting in. So that it's like, wow, you want this from me. You want me to go deeper into my own self in communion with Spirit. Wow, I had no idea. I thought you were the enemy. No, you're actually an incredibly divine usher wanting me to go in deeper. Wow, thank you. When we see it for what it is, it says, oh, glad you got it. My work's done. See you.
You know, that's really strong, and thanks for bringing that up, because it helps put better words on an experience that I had recently where I recognized that as something that was happening. It was actually a seminar I was listening to, but it was the sense of what is the source of that, and then when I recognized the question of just considering the source, there was almost like an innate something in me that shifted everything. Like there was a switch that went as I turned my question and said to saying everything that's outside that I'm seeing, that I'm looking at. What is the source question almost kind of turned me around. And I realized it was like, whoa, this is there. It's not about the logic or the illogic of the problem anymore. It's just a simple, what's the source?
Yes.
And the view, the invitation, the view towards the source, and then the ushering that in that direction was enough to shift the whole thing, and to see it almost popped it up, like you were talking about earlier, going up into more of a spiritual realm.
Yes.
Of seeing it from that, it was like a catapult, just what is the source of this was enough to shift it.
Yep. I think it's an incredibly powerful awareness and transforming experience when we can really recognize the invitation embedded within depression, so that we give thanks for the invitation and the love that begets that.
So I think that the knowledge really becomes at that point, with the process you're talking about, is to realize that there's a component within it that is an invitation.
Yes. And once we can sort of get the wrapping out of the way and open the box, then we can go, oh my God, what a gift. Thank you. You want me to grow closer. You want me to leave behind my misconception and go into a deeper state of communion with Spirit. Wow, thank you. Wow.
Wow.
It's
That's beautiful, John.
That these negative emotions, as they're called, they're really, and even the ego, it gets a bad rap. It's seen as the enemy, but it's the physical plane realm, so to speak, embodiment of a sacred usher in the physical realm. Because all it does is put out emotions that, again, are invitations to grow closer in communion.
Wouldn't it be nice if it came with just a little piece of chocolate on it so we would know for sure that
yeah.
Okay. There's that.
I like it. or even a little book that like how to translate that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So what we find is that, the ego only puts out those negative emotions during adversity. When it need to get closer in union with God than during adversity.
Oh, say that again, please.
So the only time the ego puts out those negative emotions is during adversity. When else do we need to grow more closely in union with God?
And so the sense is almost as if that adversity comes with the answer to the adversity if we look for it.
Yep. It's the invitation.
The invitation and the usher.
Yep. And so that, adversity occurs and we get anxiety or anger or depression, kind of the big three in their offshoots. And they're all saying, during this time of challenge, be sure you're in connection with your truest, authentic self.
Yeah. In the connection, I see the aspect of the connection. I don't know, were you able to watch the last interview I did with John Overdurf? Were you able to see that at all? I don't know if you
saw parts of, yes.
Saw parts of it. Yeah. And that was part of and I did a radio interview where we talked about it, was that when you're in the limbic system, one of the things we had talked about was that the biggest thing that's missing, and that's this whole state of fear of what's going on with the coronavirus and the economic challenges and everything that's happened, is that when we're in that state, it's almost as if there's not an opportunity to connect. The connection aspect, it blocks it. And so to get the body calmed down to the aspect of the diaphragm and change the breathing, get in maybe some, like you were going to talk about peripheral vision, that those things drop the sympathetic and go into the parasympathetic nervous system, which then we have the ability to connect, which these spiritual processes that you're talking about have the ability to work from that perspective.
Yes. Oh, exactly. And so, sometimes peripheral vision is certainly a great way to disconnect from the limbic system and its overactivity. It evokes what Herbert Benson, a Harvard MD, coined as the relaxation response.
Yes, I remember that.
So once we get into peripheral vision, gain release from the limbic system, and we're kind of restored to our natural rhythm, our natural well-being. And then we're free to think again instead of being sort of dictated to.
Yeah, because those processes you just talked about were connective processes. And it's really hard to connect when we're in the midst of something with the powerful, they say, some people say it's 4-1 over our positive states, the negative states that kick into gear. If we don't have any tools, it's hard enough to do it if we do have tools at first. And then are you saying that a process begins to kick in automatically once you practice this for a while? What happens if we take, the first and second exercise that we talked about and practice them? Does that then start to become more natural or easier for people?
It absolutely does. It creates not just habit, but literally neurological support wiring, so to speak, to sustain that. So it creates a whole network within that becomes available as a result of that. Lots of really great research on gratitude, just simple gratitude. Not even necessarily for, depression is this lovely sacred usher inviting me to commune with God, and which is fabulous. Even at simple practical levels of looking for the positives, looking for the blessings and counting them, creates changes in our nervous system, creates changes in even our hypothalamus It allows serotonin and dopamine to be released. It creates a change even in our food habits and our behavior. It's remarkable, the profound ripple effect of gratitude. And it's sort of like in Gestalt, you're familiar with figure ground, right?
Sure.
And so the limbic system has a particular figure ground arrangement, and our higher consciousness has the exact opposite figure ground arrangement.
That's interesting. Can you give me a little bit more of that?
Sure.
The exact opposite.
Yeah. So limbic system is looking for, because it's survival based, it's looking for all potential dangers or actual perceived dangers.
Yes.
So it's always pointing out and looking for negatives or things that could become. And so coexisting with that is positives and opportunities. Now, the higher consciousness notices those because it knows it's already safe.
Yeah, its paradigm is completely different. Its frame is
just about inverted, which is why every solution that the limbic system tries to come up with worsens the problem because it has it backwards.
Wow. That's, and gratitude is part of the process that is the reverse of what's happening on the limbic system.
You could think of, yes, exactly. It's almost like they don't seem to make 5-speed cars much anymore, but you could think of gratitude as pushing in the clutch to shift gears.
So it's the opening. So if, in a sense of what you were saying earlier, if I started, what you said, to say this is a gift that I'm going to invite and it's an invitation that in a sense puts you into gratitude, to push the clutch in, to then be able to shift to your higher consciousness.
Yes. So then that collection of thank yous and appreciations become a whole physiological cascade of feel-good chemicals.
I like that word. I lived in the Cascades for a while. So.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got some nice connotations for me personally.
Cool.
I'm sure the people that live up there in the Cascades. Yeah. So that was it. And there was something else that you talked about the peripheral vision. Here comes the sun. You talked to me a little bit about the amygdala in the brain. But you go your way.
The emotional center. And so it's that reflex, but it can only react to the meaning we give it. And so,
so the amygdala, and there's like two amygdalas, if I remember right. There's like, they're the identical, but they're like a left and a right version of it or something. And it can only accept the meaning we give it, but to do that, we almost have to go into the higher brain first to give it a different meaning.
Precisely. We have to get out of the reflex response and get into that consciousness so that we give the amygdala different but more accurate, also more importantly, different and more accurate meaning, and then it will respond differently. So that's where gratitude gets to be the opportunity to help the amygdala generate gratitude. It's like, wow, some things aren't going so well, but God, what a sunset. Look at that cloud. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Or watch the squirrel. It's jumping up the tree there and it's found something. And just kind of nature is a beautiful place to express and find gratitude. And so what we do is we invite the amygdala to generate gratitude.
And the amygdala remembers this process?
It does. It gets, it's subject to training like all of our...
Oh, it is? Okay.
Right. So we can encourage it and support it and give it so that it becomes more and more familiar, because then the figure and ground switch happens. So then we're looking for things that we're grateful about. Oh, that person let me in traffic. Wasn't that really nice? Wow, that's very kind. That doesn't happen very often. That's nice. And so, they had that thing in the grocery store I was looking for. Wow, I love that thing. I'm so glad they had that particular product. And so we start looking for it, and then we find it, because we always find what we're looking for, right?
So once you find that and you apply the gratitude, or what you feel good about the squirrel in the tree or whatever it is, how long does it take for the amygdala to switch that over that we can start feeling that?
Sure. It's as far
approximately. I know you don't have some kind of a equipment or registering what's happening. So to the best of your ability,
it's sort of, at least in the moment, it's instantaneous. But as far as becoming an enduring pattern,
yes.
3 to 6 weeks.
3 to 6. Okay. So it's a small commitment to say, hey, look,
really
you get to feel good for 3 to 6 weeks while you're practicing, training this to feel good more often.
Yes, and then it reinforces itself because the hypothalamus gets some dopamine going, and then dopamine says, oh, well, let's get some more. Here's how we do it. We look for the even numbers instead of the odd numbers. Yeah, okay, because they all coexist. Wow, cool. And then we create, because of our response, we create an internal environment. We create an internal reality, as well as an external. We get certain behaviors. And so we're actually creating our reality by getting into our own sort of inception point.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, I can start to see that sunset you love is ready to get in your eyes. So I'm aware of the time as well. You gave us graciously an hour here and taught us some amazing things. Is there anything else you want to talk about? And then why don't you then go into your seminar that's coming up and what
Sure.
if people want to learn more?
Thanks. I guess there's a process that came to me one time when I was meditating, and I just call it the thank you prayer. And what it amounts to is, like, in 3-second increments, you think of, picture, and feel something that can be something that did happen.
You broke up a little bit there, so I'm not sure that's going to come across to the audience. But last thing I heard was in 3-second increments, and then I saw your mouth moving, but I didn't hear anything.
I was practicing my ventriloquism.
Ventriloquism.
So anyway, it sort of gets a natural rhythm of its own, like in 3-second increments. If we picture and feel and give gratitude for something we are appreciating and grateful for, and that can be something that did happen or even something that didn't happen.
So it doesn't matter about the time frame. It could be something from the past, from the future, from the now. It doesn't matter.
Yes, it can be an early memory of being a 5-year-old.
Gotcha.
And so what happens, it gets a life of its own, and it's really interesting. So we picture something, oh, I'm really grateful for that, and I feel it, and I give thanks. And then next memory, next thing we feel thankful for, next event we're grateful for. 3 seconds, see it, feel it, give gratitude, shift to the next one, roughly 3-second increments. Pretty soon, it just starts getting a rhythm, and you're fed by your gratitude memory.
Ah, nice.
And then, next thing you know, you find that the opportunities for gratitude it turns into something without end.
It just becomes is in the system.
And within 30 to 60 seconds, you gain liftoff into that place of endless gratitude.
That's sweet. It reminds me of something that it was happening with me recently, and I shifted to something similar, and I'm going to reapply what you're saying to this and see how that works. And what I would do is I'd have little memories of little things that happened to me from my past. And it would maybe happen in Florida where my mother used to live, or back in New York where I grew up. And my pattern would be to go into the aspect of, oh, I got to get back there to feel it again. Oh, and I've been doing that for you. And then I caught myself, it was probably a year and a half when I moved to Arizona, because I was thinking of all these places that I'd like to go. And I'm realizing, wow, I used to travel across the country back and forth to get these feelings associated with. I'm like, it's happening right now. And I feel that same feeling right now. And why don't I just say, enjoy it, apply that to right now, and just be with it right now. But I love the aspect of saying, what if I say thank you for that and really have some gratitude and let it be where I'm at right now? Not that I have to do something else and go get it or go search for it. It's here right now.
That's right. And so then it becomes again about source too.
Oh, good. I like the way you put that in there. That's sweet. You can see why I like doing coaching with Dr. Burton. It's a magical experience. So the aspect of then adding the source to go back and say, what is the source of that? And it's maybe looking at it as an invitation, as a gift, instead of just a memory, to say, wow, these are invitations and gifts.
Yep. If it's positive, it's just direct experience of that constant presence of love. And if it's negative, it's the invitation. And we just simply find that wow, what is it really inviting? Wow, communion. Thank you. Thank you for that. Wow.
It is a kind of a communion, isn't it? It's a,
Mm-hmm.
we've got, I think some of us grown up Catholic have a certain word to what communion is, and it's not a bad thing to me. But if you take the idea of communing with somebody or something in a different type of a way, I think that was more the original meaning of how it was meant.
Yeah. It becomes an experience. It's not just something we think, it becomes an experience. That experience alters our awareness and our behavioral choices.
Wow. So is there anything that I haven't asked you or anything you'd like to talk about that I'd like, and I want to hear about the seminar, but before that,
sure.
is there anything else you'd like
I'll mention one more thing about transnoia or the conspiracy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And that is that this embedded invitation to communion resides at a social level, it resides within families, and it resides within us as individuals. So that even in families, there is that same kind of scenario playing out where the adversity or the judgment is an invitation again to go inside the self and get into communion with that higher consciousness, with that creator source, and to recognize that that's what's happening, because the only reason the negativity is happening in the family is because those people are out of connection.
So that it's a way of
inviting you to connect.
And that it's almost like there's that old book, that old NLP book, Turtles All the Way Down.
Yes.
And it's just it's like transnoia all the way out.
Exactly. All the way out, all the way up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Where that it's there. That is really cool. And
so one of the things that happens in families is we if things didn't go real well, which, I mean, who didn't have some things go wrong, all right? But we have a tendency, especially at limbic system level, is to look at what was missing. What we didn't get. And there was this client who was talking about, she had to like separate it from her entire family because they were so toxic and so judgmental and condemning. And there was this like cluster of them, and then she was out separate. And on initial response, she felt ostracized and rejected and not accepted, essentially. But in the metaphor realm, it was like, the rest of your family is participating in one of those sack races where two people have one leg and one bag, and they can't move worth a crap. They're always falling down. They're all stuck. You've got two free, good legs to move wherever you want to move. That's the gift that was provided by your family.
Yeah.
And so these embedded gifts that they couldn't work out, they couldn't figure out how to get free of it. And they gave you the opportunity. They gave you this gift of freedom. And that's their gift. That's love. They couldn't speak it. They can't tell you consciously. But that's what you knew to do. Great instincts.
And hopefully what we learn and what we grow into is something that we can give back to them on a different level.
Exactly. And in ways, you are solving the puzzle they couldn't solve by utilizing that freedom and celebrating it. They heal through your healing.
Different type of evolution, huh?
Yes, backward evolution, right? It was back on the generational chain because they didn't know what to do with it, and they handed it to you.
It's almost like, in the sense, I was thinking evolving your DNA by allowing these higher gifts to come in as gifts and to see it in its proper way instead of the way we've been conditioned or trained.
Right, the way that the limbic or ego interprets it.
Through no fault of our own. It's been there to help us and survive and get there. And it's a good thing that we have these abilities within us to be able to go.
Yes, to see it differently, to respond differently.
Yeah,
exactly. So, Mark, very much for taking the time to have me on and to have a really rich discussion with you. I appreciate it.
This has been a wonderful discussion, John. Thank you so much for giving me and the listeners these gifts that you've learned and developed and created over a period of time. It's wonderful. So if somebody does want to, is it a phone call you're doing? Because I'm sure it was live at one point, but probably now on the Zoom. And so tell us real quickly about that if they want to.
It's going to be April 19 on a Sunday from let's see, 1 to 3 Mountain Time, 12 to 2 Pacific Time, and 3 to 5 Eastern Time. It's going to be a Zoom meeting. It'll be video as well as audio. So it'll be live, and there'll be opportunities for discussion. There's some experiential exercises as well as just presenting material about how to see through the surface into the deeper presence of spirit and utilize that transnoia so that we recognize the conspiracy of love and to be able to experience it, receive it, and thrive and flourish from it.
That's great. And if they want to know more about it, I'll put a link up, but is there a link or something you want to tell them where to go right now if they want to look at it? And again, I'll put it up with this video.
Absolutely. Thanks. They can go to my website, which is drjohnjburton.com. And on there's also a link to my Facebook page where it will be posted as well. Or they can just email me email us.
What's your Facebook page, John?
It is Dr. John J. Burton also.
Okay.
And so it's got a lot of different kind of postings from different spiritual and psychological perspectives.
It's a great page. It's a great page. And that was part of my inspiration was looking at some of your posts and say, hey, John, let's talk about some of what you're putting out there now, some really good things. And I think the people during this period of time, it'll be very useful for. And remember to put the doctor in there, because if you go John J. Burton, you may get somewhere else. So it's Dr. John J. Burton.
So it's just the DR, and it's all lowercase for the website as well as the Facebook page. And they can always email me at JOHNJBURTON, John J. Burton at bellsouth.net.
Okay. And I'll put both of those things up so you can have links to click on. John, as always, it's a pleasure. I so appreciate you taking this time, and you have some wonderful gifts. And I'm still sitting in a pretty good place from that little bit of a trance you took me through a little earlier.
Cool. Glad you enjoyed. Continue savoring.
Yeah.
And thanks again for the opportunity, Mark. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, John. Stay with me here for a second, and I'll say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for listening. And again, you've got his address, John J. Burton, Dr. John J. Burton, and I will put them up for you to listen to. This is Mark J. Ryan. Thanks so much. Talk again soon. Bye-bye.